Thank you so much for joining us today. We're so pleased to have you. My name is Leor Rotchild. I'm the Executive Director of CBSR, and this is the Sustainable Procurement Fellowship Information Session. A huge thank you to the CBSR team and our partners for pulling this webinar together. Over the next 60 minutes, we will give you some background on the Sustainable Procurement Fellowship Program, including what it looks like and how you and your organization can benefit. And in addition, we'll hear from two of the thought leaders informing the content and delivery of the program, as well as answer any of your burning questions. Before we go any further, I want to acknowledge that we recently recognized the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation, and I'm joining you today from Calgary, the unceded land of the Treaty 7 region and traditional home to many Indigenous nations, including the Blackfoot First Nations of Siksika, the Piikani and the Kainai, as well as the Stoney Nakoda First Nations of Chiniki, Bearspaw, and Wesley, as well as the Tsuut'ina First Nation. The city of Calgary is also homeland to the historic Northwest Métis and Métis Nation of Alberta, Region 3. I encourage you to let us know in the chat box which traditional land you're joining us from. And in case you aren't certain, we've dropped a link in the chat to nativeland.ca. If you haven't been to this website, really great resource where you can type in your address and learn more about the place where you work, learn, play, and live. I invite you to continue to use the chat throughout today's event and engage with each other. And if you have any questions, please use the Q&A function to submit them, and we'll try our very best to answer all of the questions that you have throughout the webinar. So I'm really proud to say that we will be joined this hour by two people that I deeply admire and have the privilege of collaborating with on this Sustainable Procurement Fellowship. They are Bob Willard and Frances Edmonds. And I'll introduce them now, but bring them on camera a little later in the program. But just so you know, Bob Willard is a leading expert on quantifying and selling the business value of corporate sustainability strategies. He's a sought-after speaker who's given over 1,500 presentations to corporate, government, university, and NGO audiences. He's also the author of the highly acclaimed books, The Sustainability Advantage and The Business Case for Sustainability. Bob has created a number of valuable tools, including the basic sustainability assessment tool for suppliers to determine their performance on core sustainability issues. And for those of you unfamiliar with Frances Edmonds, you're in for a treat. She is the head of sustainable impact of HP Canada, where she's responsible for business development and oversees corporate social responsibility programs nationally. As a seasoned executive with a focus on sustainable procurement, Frances is driving meaningful cross-sectoral change that supports a more circular and sustainable economic future for Canada. Her efforts have earned her recognition as one of Canada's foremost sustainability professionals, having received 2 Clean 50 awards and led to HP becoming the most sustainable technology company in Canada. More on that shortly. We're excited to have these two leaders as advisors and supporters of the Sustainable Procurement Fellowship Program, and I'm honored to have them join us for our discussion here today. But before I bring them out, let me unpack this opportunity a little bit further for you so it's clear what we're talking about. Let me begin by answering the question, why? Why would you want to be a Sustainable Procurement Fellow? Well, first and foremost, this is a professional development opportunity that will enable you to expand your network and collaborate with others within your value chain and across the Canadian economy. You'll learn from the top experts in sustainable procurement who will lift the hood and demystify the most powerful and underutilized lever for addressing your company's Scope 3 emissions. And you'll gain access to the very latest thinking and tools to confidently design your own procurement plan that is custom fit for your organization and be better equipped to work with your supply chain teams and drive measurable emission reduction results. Lastly, you'll receive a complimentary pass to Globe Exchange, which will be held in person in Toronto from February 27th to March 1st of 2023. Some of you might be more familiar with Globe Capital. That's the former name of what is now Globe Exchange. It's one of the signature Globe Series events, and the value for that pass alone is $1,500. On the next slide here, we've summarized the framework that we're working towards, and CBSR was really fortunate to work with Monica DePonte of Shift and Build to design the fellowship program. And Bob Willard and Frances Edmonds had a lot of input too, of course. Together, we've designed a learning and action framework that will equip you to tailor a sustainable procurement plan for your organization. The fellowship is divided into 4 phases with 3 workshops in each phase. The Explore phase is all about understanding your business case, getting familiar with what your organization is doing and what it's not doing. The Reframe phase focuses on understanding the potential impact that sustainable procurement could have on your organization. Phase 3, the co-creation phase, is all about collaboration with peers, experts, and your organization's procurement teams to prioritize ideas and achieve breakthrough sustainability outcomes. The final phase is Catalyze. It's the phase where you'll work with your procurement team to turn one of your priority ideas into a prototype, and you'll test how it works and learn how to scale it. This next slide here is a closer look at the specific workshops and cadence of events that are happening as part of this program. It works out to 12 workshops over the course of 6 months, and most of the sessions will take place virtually, except for the in-person workshop taking place at Globe Exchange in Toronto, which I mentioned previously. I won't dive too deep into this schedule, so feel free to take a screenshot of it now or download these slides from the CBSR website, just cbsr.ca/SPF. These workshops are accompanied by tangible deliverables that fellows will be expected to work on outside of the workshops. An example might include collaborating with your procurement team to identify which sustainability considerations are currently included as part of your supply chain process. It's really important that this work is not seen as something that you do in your spare time or off the side of your desk. It should help you to do your job better. And your employer should support you to commit approximately 2 hours of your time per week to this initiative. That's how you're going to get the most out of this fellowship. The next slide here, we expect to get a lot of applications for this, but we will select no more than 40 fellows to be part of this program. Applications are open right now on the CBSR website, and they close October 18th. So don't delay, get yours in as soon as possible. And frankly, I've been watching the applications as they come in, and I can tell you that there's a really broad mix of very seasoned sustainability directors and associate VPs who have a lot of experience with sustainable programs, but we also have a number of sustainability managers that have applied who seem to see this as a way to develop their expertise and gain new insights and experience that is key to their upward mobility. Note, this program is designed especially for sustainability professionals in the private sector to influence their company's procurement strategies. It's not really for public, it's not at all for the public sector, and it's not really for procurement experts who want to use this as a vehicle to learn more about sustainability. We're assuming that everybody coming in the door is already working on sustainability issues, and it's an opportunity to dive in deeper. It's very important for us to attract and curate a highly diverse fellowship from different industries, backgrounds, and perspectives. Those who identify as Black, Indigenous, and persons of color are especially encouraged to apply. Also, very important is that you must have the support of your employer to participate in the fellowship. This is not an opportunity to go rogue. It's a professional development opportunity for you to learn to do your job better, to collaborate with stakeholders and achieve breakthrough results. Finally, because this is likely to be a frequently asked question, let me disclose to you the cost to join the fellowship is $3,000. Great. So now we've set the stage. We've covered a lot of content there. Hopefully, you've got a really good idea of what this program looks like. And let me invite our guests, Bob Willard and Frances Edmonds, to join me and unpack some of the context behind why we've chosen to launch the SPF, or Sustainable Procurement Fellowship, and why it's so relevant at this particular moment in time. Let me start with you, Bob. Welcome to the webinar. Thank you so much for being here.
I'm delighted to be here.
Awesome. Bob, let's just make sure that we're covering the basics. How do you describe sustainable procurement, and what kinds of benefits can companies expect when they get it right?
Sure. I think there's a slide that has the definition. Fantastic.
Yeah, the next slide there.
Thank you. So it's really a four-part definition that says that we want to make sure that the buyers, the company which is doing the purchasing, gets the best value for their money. So we're not talking about lowest price, we're talking about best value when purchasing the most sustainable goods and services from the most sustainable suppliers in support of your organization's stated purpose and strategic goals, which usually include something to do with sustainability goals as well. So what's that got to do with the job of a sustainability professional? Well, it turns out that many procurement people perhaps aren't as comfortable with this whole idea of what a sustainable good and service looks like and need a little bit of help on that. And they also wouldn't recognize a sustainable supplier if they saw one. So we need some help on how the heck would you assess how sustainable your supplier is, or how would they self-assess and be able to evaluate the way in which various suppliers compare on their attention to people and planet. So the power of this definition is that it not only talks about the attributes of the goods and services, it talks about the attributes of the supplier as an enterprise, as a company. So it's really important that we understand how they can do that and give them credit for that, give them preferential treatment if they are more sustainable than other organizations. So when we're talking about sustainable procurement, it's really an umbrella term for circular procurement, green procurement, responsible procurement, net zero procurement. All of those things are within the scope of what a sustainable procurement process is all about. So the question is, what's in it for a company to adopt this approach to their procurement? Is this going to cost an arm and a leg, or is this going to be a good thing? And the usual reasons for a company doing anything, undertaking any initiative, come to play. And there are only three reasons that a company ever does something in the first place. One is to fulfill their purpose. Number two is to capture opportunities. And number three is to avoid risks. So on the purpose part, that's the last line in that definition, it helps the organization, if they care about sustainability and they've got goals about it, it helps them with their mutual accountability for what's happening in their value chain on these things. And it's pretty clear these days that companies are more and more accountable, mutually accountable, for what's happening in their supply chain as part of their value chain, especially when it comes to greenhouse gas emissions. So this is a way for the organization, for the company, to start to get better data on what's happening in their value chain through the procurement function. So the second thing that we look for, not only fulfilling your purpose and your goals, but also making sure you're capturing opportunities. And opportunities is code for saving money and making money. So the next slide talks a little bit about the saving money part. We just go to the next slide, please. Okay, so what we're talking about here is, okay, this is the risk part. And that's really important, that we're making sure that the costs of some of the things that you are acquiring are going to be under control, because you're looking for ways to save on some of the things that you are accountable for. So the recession is looming, reduce your team's costs and your life cycle risks. The costs are really, really important. Cost of carbon, for example, is going up.
Yeah.
And you are accountable for the carbon footprint of your suppliers. And in fact, if it's costing them a fair amount to be able to produce the goods and services because of their carbon footprint, it's going to get more as we go through the next few years. So right now in Canada, for example, the cost per ton of carbon is $50. By 2030, it'll be 170. So that cost is going up, and it helps us want to make very sure that we are being careful about acquiring goods and services from suppliers that have got that under control. The second part about carbon prices on the rise, I just mentioned that. And the third part is saving on overall costs. As you start to pay attention to these things, you start to look for efficiencies as another way of saving money. And as you know, in the sustainability world, a lot of the savings that we get from paying attention to these things is on the cost savings on energy, water, material, and waste. And that's also true for what's happening in your supply chain. And a lot of those impacts in your supply chain are higher than the impacts from your organization, and you are accountable for those. So
right.
It's important.
I think that's an important point you're making there.
Exactly, and it says 11.4 times greater on carbon. It's not just carbon. There are other things as well that are significantly higher in your supply chain. Puma, for example, as a footwear company, a few years ago took a look at their impacts on the environment, not just on society, but especially on the environment. And they found that only 6% of their impacts were coming from their own operations, and the other 94% was coming from their supply chain. So the majority of impacts are coming from the supply chain, and more we're seeing that companies are being held accountable for that. So it's really, really important. So cost saving is really important. Revenue, if you are paying attention to these things, your customers may be happier with you and give you some credit for that. The next slide talks a little bit more about the risk side. We're getting to the point where important people like investors and bankers are getting more and more interested in the carbon footprint of the organization, not only from scope 1 and 2 emissions, but also from scope 3 emissions. That's coming from your suppliers. So paying attention to that through the procurement function becomes more and more important. So what we're talking about here is getting a better handle on what's happening in your supply chain around all of these things so you can mitigate the risks. The two boxes on the right of this slide talk about some of the challenges we have in supply chains and the resilience of those supply chains as we're trying to cope with a lot of the impacts of climate change, both on the suppliers themselves and the severe weather events that may disrupt the transportation routes between you and them. So it's a much more holistic view of what the heck is going on with the organization and its value chain, and especially its upstream supply chain. So we can quantify the benefits of all of those, and that's something we can help you with in the program and help you have a really robust case for ensuring your company is taking full advantage of the benefits of sustainable procurement.
Bob, that you covered a lot there. I feel like I had a couple of other questions, but you've done such a good job of covering quite a wide breadth there. Let's sort of simmer on that and bring Frances into the conversation, because I feel like you've built some really nice segues of some things that I think Frances can also help us to double click on even further. And Frances, Rachel, if you don't mind putting up that slide there, we have a slide that because in my introduction of Frances, I talked about HP being the most sustainable company in Canada. There actually is a slide that actually backs that up. And Frances, if any of you know Frances, she is that person who says, "Well, I'm not going to say something unless I can back it up." So let's put that slide up. It's slide 13 there, and so Frances, frankly speaking, you were the one who really inspired us to undertake the Sustainable Procurement Fellowship Program. And we're really, really thankful that HP Canada has stepped up to invest in the development of this program. Why? why does, HP obviously is like, we see it as an ideal partner for this program, but from your perspective, what motivated HP to do that and for you to be as involved as you are in the creation of this program?
Well, thank you. And Bob, you really set this up very well. So thank you for this. Delighted to be here and to meet everyone. I think every one of us sustainability professionals would hope to be able to make the claim that each of our companies would be the leader in their industry around sustainability. But when you get to that point and you're able to say something like, Canada's most sustainable technology company, and then you turn around and you go, well, this should help us win more business so I can continue to invest because I know there's so much more we could be doing. And then you go along with your sales team and you go to any customer and you go, well, here's what we do for sustainability. Do you like it, Mr. or Mrs. Customer? And they go, frankly, we don't care. And that's how the marketplace is in Canada today. And we sort of thought, well, this isn't very good. What can we do about this? So the first thing we did was we did some research to see just how bad is the practice of sustainable procurement in Canada. And spoiler alert, we got some academically published research looking at public procurement. And I would say private sector procurement is no better. It's pretty bad out there. And let me give you an example. Let me make this real for you. A recent government, and I won't say which one it is, just to spare them the embarrassment, multiple $million deal on RFP on the street for PCs. They did include some questions on sustainability, so check mark, they tried, but they weren't very good questions, so maybe they could do better on that. But the real kicker was that the points for the sustainability questions were worth 15 points out of a total score of 500.
15 out of 500.
500. So if we think of business as being a rational player in the marketplace and we're in a capitalist economy, and we say, what signal does that tell any supplier? It tells a supplier that you as the buyer really don't care about sustainability, and it's not going to be material in how you judge the performance of that business. So looking at this, we said, well, okay, this isn't very good for HP as a leading company, but what we actually need is more companies in Canada to step up and do more. And I know you're running a leaderboard with CBSR, but we've got less than 70 Canadian companies that have set a science-based target for carbon reduction in the decade of climate action. And frankly, that's a scary statistic, right? So what we decided to do was to take our corporate social responsibility programs and pivot them to invest in changing the way Canada buys. And we started working with procurement professionals and with governments, and we've done a number of pilots. We've created a Clean 50 award for sustainable procurement. We've done all kinds of things. We're throwing lots of spaghetti at the wall to see what works, but we haven't really tackled sustainability professionals. And one of the things that we've really realized is after 6 years of talking with procurement people is that they don't have the technical knowledge or necessarily the organizational structure to actually really advance sustainable procurement. They need help. And so this thing is designed to try and give those procurement professionals the help that they need and hold their hands. And I just want to end this question by giving you a quote from a book called Good Planets Are Hard to Buy. It says, what is the biggest impediment to implementing sustainable procurement? It's not a lack of best practices or strategic knowledge or expertise or funds. As Bob mentioned, sustainable procurement is probably the most efficient spend to get us to net zero that we have. But the author of this book feels it's a lack of professional fortitude to leverage the resources at hand to do more social and economic good because it invites a level of personal risk. And procurement people do not like risk at all. They are hired to be recipe followers, not recipe writers. And so at the end of this program, I would hope that you all, having signed up, would be capable and competent to assist those procurement people in leveraging the most underused blind spot tool that we have.
Well, yeah, you've done a really good job there, Frances, of helping us to understand what you're seeing out there as the significant challenge that needs to be solved. There is not currently, according to what you're saying, a strong signal into the market that companies that have solutions to reduce emissions and achieve other sustainability outcomes are necessarily being awarded the contracts as a result of that.
Well, and if you think about it, if you're in, and I'm not saying this because it will benefit HP, but if we want more companies in Canada to step up and really tackle their carbon emissions or whatever risks there are in the supply chain, it costs money. We all know around the table, it costs money to do this.
Yeah.
And if your customer is buying simply based on the lowest price, then that's what the signal is into the marketplace to deliver the lowest price, cheapest, rainforest cutting down, unrepairable, non-recyclable good into the marketplace. And that's what we get. And that's what we've been driving for the last 80 years. And we do have procurement people who believe it is their fiduciary responsibility to take the lowest price at all times.
So what I hear you saying is that's what we're here to change. That's the ambition of this Sustainable Procurement Fellowship program. So for those of you that are strongly considering it, I guess that's the question that I think Frances has done a good job of putting on the table. Is that something you want to be part of, be part of that change? Frances, thank you so much. And Bob and Frances, please don't go anywhere because there's certainly lots more to talk about. We've really just given a flavor. Hopefully, we've given somewhat of a strong overview. I do see a number of questions in the Q&A, and so I just wanted to highlight some of those, and then we can have a bit of an overall discussion, both to answer those questions and then see where that might take us as well in terms of diving a little deeper into the subject matter. But first, let's hammer out a couple of ones that I think we can answer just kind of off the top here. In particular, there is a question about why is the program only open to private companies and not public companies? It's a great question. I'll maybe take a first crack at it. Frances, feel free to embellish as well. The most simple answer is in the design of this program, we have designed it around a specific demographic to be able to equip those folks to be able to have some of the breakthrough outcomes that we're looking to inspire in the companies. There are other initiatives already underway that are meant to affect some change from a public sector point of view. In fact, you will be able to download from the CBSR website a report that we wrote, we published back in December, that summarizes a lot of the latest thinking around sustainable public procurement. There's certainly a lot of work to be done there, and we've identified some of the challenges there. But we identified that the relationship that we have in the market is mostly with the private sector. It's where we sort of have our strength or differentiator. The content that we develop is typically for that audience. And so we knew that we could do a really good job in developing a really relevant program for that audience. And frankly, like there's a gap in the market to serve that market. Frances, anything that you wanted to add to that?
Yeah, private sector procurement is different, and public sector procurement has a lot more constraints around it and will move much more slowly. And one of the constraints they have is that they actually don't believe there are enough companies out there to meet the needs if they were to put requirements in. So it's a bit of a chicken and egg, right? And of course, they also don't like to talk to vendors because the whole system is to set up to prevent bad things like corruption from happening. So they have a very knee-jerk reaction of not wanting to talk to suppliers. So there's a lot of miscommunication there. So part of what we will need to do is talk about how we talk with public sector people. But you know, as Leor said, that we just ran a pilot with Green Economy Canada on broader public sector organizations that was released about a year ago too. So we've been doing quite a bit of work as with the CIC and Tim's group as well. So there's a lot of support in that side of the house, but nothing for private sector.
Bob, anything you wanted to add there?
Yeah, I just wanted to reinforce that we're not excluding them because they're not important, and some of us are doing a lot with the various levels of government to try to engage them in this. But CBSR, CB Business, Canadian Business for Social Responsibility, the members of CBSR are usually private sector organizations. So we've tailored this for folks that are members of CBSR and looking at it through a private sector lens. A lot of the material could also be looked at through a public sector lens. Maybe that's a different session. But this iteration is going to be primarily for the private sector organizations and use language which is appropriate for that sector.
Yeah, thank you, Bob. And just to clarify, when we say private sector, we're talking not just about publicly traded companies, but all kinds of private sector companies across the economy.
Absolutely, and including in some cases some crown corporations as well. Absolutely.
I'll just run through a couple of these other questions so we can get a number of them out there. And I like that these are really inspiring some good conversations. So thank you so much for your questions and keep them coming. So the question here is, will the program ensure there are not competing companies in the same program? How will non-disclosures be addressed? Great question. Here's the experience to date. So CBSR, we have 70 member companies. We facilitate a number of sessions, not just on procurement, but when we have done sessions on the topic of procurement supply chains, what we've found is that it's actually probably one of the greatest subject matters we've seen that inspires more collaboration than anything else. So you're right that many conversations that take place where we get different companies in the room, sometimes there's sensitive competitive information that's disclosed. We certainly have Chatham House rules ethos in each of our conversations and engagements, but we do see a lot of advantage of getting companies that are part of each other's supply chain or are utilizing some of the same suppliers for their business. And so we don't want to limit ourselves to having like one company from one sector. We do want to have a wide variety of companies with various sort of complexities in their supply chains. So the question of how will we address non-disclosures is a really good one. We're open to feedback if you've got a specific process that's native to your company. But generally speaking, our modus operandi is that we go in with Chatham House rules, and that there is a basically direction that we're not disclosing competitive information. Nobody's asking you to. It's really about disclosing the opportunities of where this group might better collaborate.
I just want to jump in there. You know, sustainability is a team sport, and really to tackle the wicked problems we're facing, we need to collaborate in all kinds of sectors, and that's with competitors, with nonprofits, with governments. Like, we just have to learn to flex that muscle more and more. It's the only way we're going to fix the problems.
And it's also very often called pre-competitive collaboration. So what we're talking about is the same kind of thing that any trade organization goes through with their members, all of whom are in a similar sectors, similar industry perhaps. And they do have sessions for them, and the Chatham House rules and so on apply, and people are much more comfortable than you would probably give them credit for with that kind of a mix. And they benefit enormously from it.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for adding all that. There were a couple of questions related to cost, and I'll just say generally about cost that we've done our very best to make this a very affordable, low barrier kind of cost like barrier to entry. And so what we would prefer to do instead of giving discounts to member companies or other companies that are in different situations is really look at companies that might need some kind of subsidy. Perhaps they're from an underrepresented group that we want to have in the mix because it really enhances the overall diversity and variety of perspectives. So we want to be in a position to be able to offer those subsidies if possible. And so from that point of view, we're not sort of rushing to provide discounts to a number of others if they don't sort of meet the criteria of needing a subsidy. Yeah, question about the process of like the events themselves. If you're not able to make one or more of the actual workshops, will the sessions be recorded? Generally speaking, no, the sessions will not be recorded because, again, for that Chatham House rules environment, it is important that we want people to openly talk about some of the challenges that they're working through, and we want them to be really candid conversations that way. So we generally find that recording sessions makes it a little more formal and less likely to get into the real stuff. So that is a consideration. You know, looking at the calendar, it's all there in the application. If you find that you are in a position where you're not going to be able to make a number of those dates, maybe it's not for you at this time, and maybe in a future iteration that the timing might be better for you. Another question is around whether we're open to the idea of having more than one representative from your company participate in the program. And this is a great question. The frank answer is we would prefer not. No, we want you to be a fellow. We don't want your company to be a fellow. We want you as an individual. Of course, you're representing your company. You're wearing the company's hat as you're in the session, but you're also wearing your own hat. And we just find that the spirit of creating this collegial group that's sharing and hopefully collaborating, that we want the individuals to commit to each of the dates, not share them with other colleagues.
Having said that, there are opportunities, of course, for these folks to engage with their colleagues,
Yes.
Especially ones in procurement, in finance, in operations, and so on, as a part of what we take them through. So it's not that we're trying to exclude those folks. It's just designed for the sustainability professionals. And we certainly do encourage that kind of collaboration with their colleagues, because without those relationships, not much happens. And in fact, this can be a wonderful catalyst for the sustainability professionals to develop and build on those relationships with their colleagues, without whom they really can't do their job, without the cooperation of all of those folks who need to be on the same wavelength. So it's going to be a wonderful catalyst for conversations and taking action together on things that others see the value of as well.
That's a great point. Thank you so much for adding that, Bob. And one thing that I've seen in some of the questions that I've been fielding from people who have expressed interest and followed by email is people are saying, this looks interesting, but is this maybe more for my procurement people, or should I be talking to my procurement people about this? And again, to reinforce what I've said earlier in this webinar is that we've designed it for sustainability professionals, not necessarily for procurement professionals who want to get more sustainability experience or knowledge. But of course, it makes a lot of sense for you to engage your procurement people and say, hey, here's a really exciting professional development opportunity. It will require me working with you. So I hope that you'll be open to, as I'm learning, that I'm sharing these learnings back with you, and that we could do more together. That is a really healthy way, I think, to proceed in this. And so even though you won't be necessarily sharing this experience with others in your company, there are opportunities to engage them, involve them. In particular, the opportunity, the in-person opportunity at Globe Exchange is one opportunity to expand and bring back some of what you're learning through this program with others in your organization. So there are some touch points like that, but generally we want you we want you to be the representative of your organization as a fellow.
Can I just jump in with an observation? You know, as a seasoned sustainability professional, it's our job to be in everybody else's business. So we have to go and lift the rocks and, you know, insert ourselves into other lines of businesses. The parallel with procurement is that everybody goes to them. They are a service organization for every function within the business. So there's a nice parallel between our two professions. The difference is that we have to force ourselves into other people's business. People go to procurement to ask for help. So it's a nice partnership that we touch all lines of business. The difference is the attitude of the lines of business coming to that function and whether they come with open arms or expecting service. Yeah,
great point.
And we also encourage the engagement with the procurement people in a helpful way, not a nagging way, but a helpful way. So, for example, in the 4 phases of the program, the first phase is explore. And one question is, how much are you already doing on sustainable procurement? And gives you a framework with which you can have a conversation with them and see how much they're already doing on these things, and maybe opportunities for them to do more in some areas that they've been a little bit challenged by, and you can help them with. So we'll give you some tools that help you do that, and encourage that relationship to build all the way through the 4 phases of the program. Because if they're not engaged and excited about this the way you are, nothing's going to happen. So we need to make sure that that is a positive, collaborative relationship, and structure it so that you get full benefit from that.
Yeah. And I would say, sorry, the work that I've been doing with procurement professionals is they almost without fail actually want to do this. They're excited about it. They just don't know how. So we need to help them.
Right.
And one of the things I've been learning about, and some of us learning came from both of you in this process, is that procurement can be also very decentralized. There might be a supply chain management group, and then like division groups that do buying for specific areas of the business. It's in terms of developing strategy, it can be a really helpful process to have somebody who's not necessarily in procurement, but has a vested interest in achieving some of the outcomes like reducing greenhouse gas emissions, to be an expert walking in and providing some solutions to that very sort of decentralized procurement.
And actually, could we just pull up that slide showing the Scope 3 emissions from Carbon Intelligence?
That's just in the appendix there, Rachel.
And I think it's a very helpful slide that, we're all, working very hard to look at our carbon, our net zero and carbon goals, but we might not have put it into this kind of a perspective. And this is from Carbon Intelligence. I snipped this from a webcast that I was actually on. And certainly when we look at HP's carbon footprint, very similar, very large percentage is outside of our control.
But you are accountable for it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think this is a really powerful argument for why we're doing this particular fellowship and why we're doing it right now. If you're serious about addressing Scope 3 emissions, which is where the majority of the organization's emissions are, this is a really important vehicle to get there.
And as Bob pointed out, it's not just the carbon, right? It's where all the other risks are, whether it's biodiversity, water, inequality, slave labor, you name it, it's all in the supply chain.
And the requirement for companies to get their hands around all of this is starting to come from not only scientists and non-governmental organizations and so on, but bankers and investors as well. So the stock market exchanges in the US and in Canada are starting to put requirements on listed companies that they be more forthright in disclosing not only scope 1 and 2, but also scope 3 emissions in order to be listed on those exchanges. That's a pretty hot topic right now, but the direction that we're going in is that sooner or later, being able to be more transparent about what's going on in your supply chain relative to greenhouse gases is not going to be as optional as it is right now. And the more we can do to lay the groundwork for being able to tap into that through the procurement people, the better.
And I guess I'm going to make one apology, which is now that you've seen this, you can't unsee this. So, you know, most procurement people had no sustainability education. I'd argue most sustainability people have very little knowledge about procurement. And so I think that's where the perfect blind spot happens. So now that you've had your eyes open to this, even if you don't become a fellow, you probably will need to look at your own practices in your own organization and even in your own personal life.
For sure. But this issue is not going away. It's only going to increase. And this is the opportunity now to really wrap your hands around it, wrap your head around it, wrap your heart around it, and develop the expertise to be able to work with the teams in your company that are responsible for pushing this and provide that sustainability insight that they're going to need to achieve these outcomes. Any final words before I wrap up here, Bob, Frances?
I just say I'm very excited about this. Can't wait to get started on it, and I know it's going to be a fun experience and a learning experience for all of us. So I'm looking forward to having people sign up and getting started.
Wonderful.
And I'll just say that from my point of view, sustainable procurement is the biggest untapped market force that we've got available to us to help us get to a decarbonized economy. And if we're smart about it, and if we provide the right expertise to the sustainability and to the procurement people through the sustainability people, we can do this in a way that's good for everybody and make it happen.
Awesome. Thank you both so much. Really appreciate you being part of this this webinar and this program generally. We're really excited to have you. Excited for all of you to be able to experience what we've designed for you, and Bob and Frances are going to be people you're going to be seeing throughout this fellowship program. Thank you for tuning in to this information session, and we'll be sharing the slides as well as the recording on our website. Just go to cbsr.ca. Thank you not only to our speakers, Bob Willard and Frances Edmonds, but all the people behind the scenes, especially Rachel. Thank you for managing all of our technology today. Thank you to my team, Julia, Abby, Jennifer, Julian, Ria, and Monica for your help in preparing today's webinar and for all your behind the scenes touches too. That's been really, really helpful. If you like what you heard, I strongly encourage you to apply to be a fellow. Applications are open right now. They will be open until October 18th at just before midnight Eastern time. And for additional information and to apply, just head over to cbsr.ca. If you want a direct link, it's actually cbsr.ca/SPF. That's where the Sustainable Procurement Fellowship Program lives on our website. For any other inquiries, you can email us at info@cbsr.ca. We'd love to hear from you and answer any questions that you might still have. All the resources that you saw here today will be available for download. This video will also be available for you to share with your colleagues. And don't forget to sign up to CBSR's newsletters, which you can also do from our website so that you can be the first to know about future webinars like this. Have a great rest of your day, and we hope to see you as part of the Sustainable Procurement Fellowship.